This is a spoiler warning for the 1977 film Eraserhead, directed by David Lynch.
Oh, you are sick. Some inane, bizarre person with a disturbed mind wrote that film.
It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It was the best thing I've seen all year.
This time I interpreted it as a nightmare.
Hello, and welcome to our first recap episode of Scratching Heads, where I now sit alone in my office and talk to you about how I got a hold of our guest, elaborate on some of the comments that they have made in the last episode, and mention stuff they have not mentioned because I sent them back to their grave prematurely. Our last guest, or first guest, was Karl Marx, who I have introduced as the father of communism, and also used some other words to describe him that, in retrospect, seem counterproductive to an audience that is not familiar with him. How did I manage to find him? In this case, it was easy. I entered the World Wide Web, searched for his name, and, in the first article, found where he was buried. I then purchased a plane ticket from the Void to London, which I will declare a tax write-off. When arriving in London, I entered a taxi and let myself be driven towards the Highgate Cemetery. I tipped the driver when I arrived at 11 p.m, I think. I don't quite remember. Then what happened? Let me think. I searched for his grave, images of which I saw online. I managed to find it quite quickly, since his grave is decorated with a giant version of his head mounted on top of a gravestone, which I then proceeded to open up. Not the head, mind you, but the grave itself. This is a quick reminder for my audience. What I am describing is highly illegal and you will get arrested if you are caught. Also, the spirits residing within the cemetery are rarely excited by disturbances such as these. Now to continue with my tale. After about an hour of digging and the emergence of the thought that I needed an intern, there he was, dead as a doorknob and pale as a sheet. I then spoke several satanic verses which shall not be repeated on this program, and then I was confronted with the temporarily reanimated Karl Marx, eager to lecture me on communist theory. But before we could have started our chat, I still needed to show him Eraserhead, since he had been dead for about 100 years before the movie was released. Afterwards, I gave him 15 minutes to decompress, and then it was time for the recording. If you haven't already, you can listen to the first episode of our podcast exactly where you have found this one. In these recap episodes, I will only reminisce on what has already occurred in the podcast, so it does not really make sense to listen to this without having listened to the episode in the first place. I would compare the experience of talking to Karl Marx about the film Eraserhead to a high school bully, dipping my head into the toilet while laughing maniacally at the choice of my underwear. While he mentioned several topics like the stereotypical family or the general vibe of the movie as being quite industrialized, I genuinely expected him to talk about the sequence in the movie where Henry, the protagonist's head, is turned into an actual eraser head, which constitutes the film's name. In this sequence, the head becomes a product, far removed from the individual that it once belonged to. Another thing I found quite striking about that sequence was that the way the head is manufactured into the eraser head in the end functions almost entirely without human interference, thus potentially commenting on industrialization and separating the worker from the means of production even when it is about turning the worker himself into a product. While... what is it? Excuse the interruption, my superior just came in here to tell me that he was displeased with how I handled some of the parts of our episode. I interrupted Karl Marx at least twice during our interview, which he did not fancy. I would like to sincerely apologize to both my superior and our listeners that had to witness that situation. I will do my best to not let this be repeated. It looks like I don't have a lot of time left in this episode specifically to talk about the Marx conversation, but I would like to say in conclusion that while it was not a failure per se, I believe that it could have gone way better than it actually has. I would like to play an excerpt of a part that made me actually think a bit different about the movie.
The question we must ask is this: what kind of escape does she offer?
She sings, "In heaven, everything is fine. Maybe the only salvation in this movie is heaven itself."
Salvation? No, it is resignation. What is heaven in this context but the promise of an escape that never arrives? It is the same false hope propagated by religion and ideology throughout history. An imaginary reprieve from material suffering that requires no struggle, no resistance, no transformation of the world. Henry, a passive worker, finds himself trapped within capital's monstrous grip. The woman in the radiator presents him with an alternative, but it is an illusory one. She is no revolutionary force. She does not call for change, but rather offers a dream of relief, a narcotic fantasy that seduces the alienated worker into acceptance rather than rebellion.
Thank you very much for listening. Our next episode will be set in Greece. I am very much excited for that one, and I will I will not see any of you. You will hear from me. This is how this is gonna go. Goodbye.